This Sunday, we are in session 12 of the Explore the Bible, the study of Proverbs and Song of Solomon or Song of Songs. Our text is Song of Songs, chapter 2, verse 15 to chapter 3, verse 5. The title is Relational Foundations, and the lesson summary statement is God created humans to be relational, with the greatest relationship being between Him and His people. The way I intend to start the lesson is there was an idea that was found at Go Explore the Bible about a Georgia couple that in 45 seconds used a very creative way to tell of the stages their marriage has gone through by the use of shoes. And I may show that video to the class because, like I said, it's just 45 seconds. And then say to them, if you were to tell your story of your relationship with your mate or maybe with your parents, what are the items that you would use? For example, if it were me and my wife, I would use cars. When my wife and I were dating, she had a blue Opel. Some of you will have to look that car up on the internet to understand the car I'm talking about. And I had a beautiful red and white GMC pickup. 4 on the floor, big wide tires in the back, and then it just went downhill from there. But I would use cars to tell our story because I always had the hand-me-down car, and I always have a story about each of those cars. But what item would you use? How would you tell the story of your relationship or your marriage? And I think that'll be a fun thing to do in terms of getting the class going. Also, for you to get a good overview of the Song of Solomon or the Song of Songs, let me recommend that you watch the video from the Bible Project. It's 7 minutes long, and again, it may be something that for your class you could show the class and they would enjoy because they're just very well done, and it gives a very good understanding of the Song of Solomon. Otherwise, you could use some things from that video to help them understand the background and the context of what's happening in the Song of Solomon. There may be some others that you'll see on the internet that would also provide you good background information. There's pack item 14 if you take the resource kit, and it has an outline of the book of Proverbs and an outline of the Song of Solomon. And you could help them see where you're at in terms of the story of the Song of Solomon. And you'll see that they're saying this text that we're going to be looking at is the night before the wedding and the honeymoon. Now, there are 2 titles to the Song of Solomon that we're going to be looking at, 2 lessons out of this book. Both of them have the word relationship in it. The first one is Relational Foundations. That's our lesson today. And the second is Relational Investments. So this is a book that is heavy on relationships. And each of the lesson points provide good counsel about each of those points. Relational Foundations. Our lesson is going to talk about preventative care and how do you build trust in that relational foundation, and restraints are required in order to have a good, strong relational foundation when it comes to our relationships with those that we love. And so the question would be, what can we do to support loving relationships? That's the answer that seems to be addressed, or the question that seems to be addressed in this lesson. And next week it seems as though, what actions can we take to maintain and grow our love? And so we're going to have 2 studies out of this wonderful book that talk about relationships. Now, the Song of Songs portrays sexuality as a good thing that is protected by marriage, not an evil thing that is permitted by marriage. It is the celebration of human love and human sexuality. When you come to the first point, preventative care, chapter 2, verse 15, remember we're stressing the point that God created humans to be relational, with the greatest relationship being between Him and His people. When someone is called a fox today, what do we mean by that? And they can answer that. Well, when the Bible uses that word, it has a different connotation. For example, would someone look up Luke chapter 13, verse 32? Jesus is talking about Herod. And would someone else look up Ezekiel 13, verse 3 and 4? He's talking about false prophets. And so what does Jesus mean when he uses the word fox? And what does Ezekiel mean when he uses the word fox? And in both of those, it's talking about someone who is destructive or someone who is a deceiver. So what we're talking about in terms of verse 15, we're talking about those things that are destructive, false attitudes, false actions that harm relationships. So I'd like to ask the class, so what are destructive and false attitudes and actions that harm relationships? And just have some discussion about that. And then ask the class to comment on this statement. Right now, they are little foxes, but if not dealt with, it puts the future fruitfulness at risk. Right now, they're little foxes, but if not dealt with, it puts the future fruitfulness at risk. How would you respond to that? Comment on that statement. Now, one more comment on productive care. Notice it says in verse 15, catch the foxes for us. Now, in the language of the Bible, Hebrew, and the Old Testament, this is a plural imperative. So what Solomon is asking for, the author of Song of Songs is asking for, is that more than one person needs to be involved in this act. It may be a request for friends or family to lend support to strengthen the relationship. It may be that the couple is asked to take actions themselves and to be aware of these little foxes. But do you have someone, or have you had someone in the past that was supportive of you when it came to your marriage relationship? They were people who advised or reflected things that they saw in your relationship that resulted in strengthening your marriage. Have you had people like that in the past? And it'll be, hopefully, they will have had people who have given them insights, said things, you're treating your wife this way. This is how I know you're speaking to them. Or I've always admired this about how you relate to one another. Just, they're supportive, maybe by pointing something negative out or affirming something positive. Now there are, after some conversation, I'm going to write 4 statements on the board as a way of saying, I want to summarize what we've said so far about preventative care. And these are the 4 statements that I want to write on the board. First of all, put up safeguards. Second, regular maintenance required. Third, fix things early. And fourth, surround with support. And in there, maybe point out some of our blind spots that we're not seeing. And after we've done that, I just asked the class, are there other things that we could draw out as applications from this text that we would want to say that the scriptures are speaking to us about when it comes to preventative care in our relationships? Now, the second thing he says here is about building trust. Building trust. Song of Songs, chapter 2, verse 16 through 17. Now, according to verse 16, how would you describe the way this woman feels? My love is mine, and I am his. He feeds among the lilies. And just ask for some response. How do you think she's feeling? What is she's feeling? Loved, of course. She's feeling exclusive in this relationship. There's a sense of assurance and security. There's a oneness that she's feeling with her man. Now, this phrase, he feeds among the lilies, if you're taking the position that this is a reflection of the time before their wedding, then she's anticipating a time of intimacy with her husband. There's all kinds of understandings of it. Of course, if this passage is reflecting a love poem when they're married, then it's an invitation to intimacy with her husband. This verse 17 is a beautiful phrase. It's saying, talking about the permanency and the enjoyment of this relationship until the day breaks. It's really till the day breathes. And it could be talking about when the day's ending or when the day's beginning. But it's a beautiful picture of sharing love with one another. Now, to get at what this woman is saying when she says, "My love is mine and I am his," I want to change the metaphor to see what this is communicating to us about building trust. So let me just change the metaphor. Let's say that what she says, it's not near as beautiful, but she says, "My love is on my team and I am on his team. We are a team." So answer this for me. How does a team build trust? Because we know from championship teams that the team that wins is not always the team that's the most talented and has the greatest gifts, but it is the team that works together and trusts one another. So how does a team build trust with one another? Well, there's a number of things. They stop being selfish. There may be someone on the team who's a star, but he's going to need someone to block for him or feed him the ball or field the ball after the ball is hit. There needs to be an other-centeredness. I've noticed a lot of times on basketball teams when someone's received the ball and they score, that they'll point to the other person. And I don't remember the famous coach that said, "Always point at them." And they said, "Well, what if they're not looking?" And the coach said, "They're always looking." And he was saying, don't be selfish. Recognize that success was because of others. They work together. A team has a goal. A team depends on each other. A team takes risks. A team gets to know one another. A team, as I mentioned, gives credit. A team shares in its successes and they encourage during their times of defeat and failures. All of those things are ways in which we can build trust if it's on a team. And those things apply to our relationships as well. Couples who see one another as a team and operate in that kind of an idea. We're on the same page. We're in this together. We're going to help one another. It's a we, not me kind of relationship is altogether different. It sets aside individualism. There's not this continual battle for rights and requirements. There is cooperation instead of this kind of independence. Suppose you get a new boss. He comes to you and he says to you, "Okay, what advice would you give me on how to build trust with the rest of the workers? What are the things that you would say, the things that we've listed? How would that look?" For you see, trust is something, as we learned last week, trust is something that's built over time. And the more trust that you can build, the deeper the intimacy that you can experience. And this woman is experiencing great intimacy because she has absolute trust in this man. Now just step back from that for a moment and remember what the lesson summary statement is. God created humans to be relational, with the greatest relationship being between him and his people. Now imagine the kind of trust we should have in God when you consider the kind of God that he is. He loves us with an everlasting love. He's forgiven all of our sins. And your class could talk about how this trust should be strong in a Christian's life because of the kind of God that we have. So preventative care is a way in which we can build our relationship with one another and with God. There are spiritual preventatives that we need to practice. That would be a good thing to talk in the first point. And then, of course, there's building trust. And the more that we come to know God, the more confidence we'll have in trusting Him. But then the third point is restraint required. God created humans to be relational, with the greatest relationship being between Him and His people. Restraint required. Chapter 3, verses 1 to 5. And as I mentioned, this is one of those texts where you have to take a position. Is this couple married? That has something altogether, a way in which you view this text. Or is this couple the night before? And so if they're married, then maybe you could interpret more of it more literally. But if they're not married, then this is more like a dream that she's experiencing. Now, nowhere in the scriptures, in the Song of Songs, does this woman ever convey that she's doing anything that's contrary to the rules of purity when it comes to relating to the opposite sex. Nowhere does the man act inappropriate towards this woman. So that has to be brought into mind for interpreting the Song of Songs. It is a wonderful book. It is an extremely intimate book, and yet it is a celebration of human love that God has made for us. And that is to be a reflection of even greater love that we can have for God. So our Sunday School Leader's Guide takes the position that this is before their wedding and the day before their honeymoon. And so she's dreaming these kinds of things. And she's dreaming, and she's looking forward, anticipating when this man will be her husband and be in her bed. She dreams he's gone, and she goes in search of him in the city, which would be a very uncommon thing for her to do. That's why many don't believe this is a literal expression. And she asks the guards, where is he? And she finally finds him, and she brings him back to her home. But the teacher's guide, taking the position they do, they make the explanation where she says here in the last verse, I held on to him and would not let him go until I brought him to my mother's house, to the chamber of the one who conceived me. And they say that she brought him to her mother's home and not to her bedroom, and it was her way of reserving intimacy for marriage. Others who take the position that this is a married couple, this is a picture of her receiving him in terms of them having intimacy. Well, it's a beautiful picture there, and I was just simply going to say to the class, God made a switch that turns you on, and that means it's good. If God made it, it's good. But this last verse, verse 5, where she talks to the young women of Jerusalem, she in a sense says, don't flip that switch until the time is right and the person is right. Last week we talked about the Modesto Manifesto that is associated with Billy Graham, and various rules and principles they established that they would operate their ministry by. Of course, the most well-known is the Billy Graham rule, which is that the men agreed they would never be with another woman alone, not even on an elevator, unless it's their wife or a daughter. And that served Billy Graham extremely well. Well, in Christianity Today, I found an article that said it's not Billy Graham rule or bust. And this woman that talks, her and her husband are a priest in the Anglican Church, and she goes through the idea that the Billy Graham rule is not always practical for people, that you're involved in work relationships and other kind of relationships where you can't simply always be in the presence of someone of your same sex, that you're going to be mixing with people of the opposite sex. And so in those occasions, what are the principles that need to be operating? And there are 15 of these. And before I give them to the class, I was going to make a copy of the article and give it to them. I'm going to ask the class, I'm going to explain to them these things. Obviously, there are things in your work or maybe in a school or some kind of, and you can't simply, you may not be able to practice this principle. I can't be there with that person. I can't be at that job site and not be around someone of the opposite sex. So what are the preventative practices that you have? What is the restraint required? How do you relate to someone of the opposite sex when you're in those kinds of situations? And what I'm looking for is the things they give me. I'm going to check off on these 15 things that are in this article. And then I'm going to go through it again. And again, I like to put the article in their hand. I don't agree with everything in the article, but I think it's a very informative and helpful article. But let me just give you a few examples. She says, number one, we are careful about staying close to each other and talking a lot. And she talked about date nights. Number two, we have no secrets, period, world without end, amen. Our kids know this mantra and use it against us at Christmas time. No secrets. Number three, I know all his passwords and vice versa. I have no privacy, we have no privacy. Privacy is overrated. And I could tell you that my wife knows the password to my phone and to my computer. I know what to get in, her password to her phone and computer. And when I have a conversation by text message with someone in the church who's a woman, my wife knows about that, and she can read those text messages at any time and ask questions about it. And those are just some examples that we have. As a pastor, I don't counsel women alone. I always have someone here in the office if that should take place. And when it is a woman, if it is at all possible, I have my wife present with me. She's smarter than I am, and she can certainly counsel better than I can. But those are just some safeguards, some restraints that are required. That ought to provide some helpful conversation. And in the light of the truth of this lesson, God created humans to be relational, with the greatest relationship being between Him and His people. Of these 3 points, which point do you see as the one that you would concentrate on this week in practicing the truth of God's Word? Would it be preventative care? Would it be taking actions to build trust? Or would it be establishing some restraints, being clear about restraints, sharing a password or something of that nature? Now, the last thing, the way I want to close the lesson, is I had some children's Valentine cards left over from February. I have enough for my class. So I'm going to give everyone in my class a Valentine's card. And I'm going to even provide the stamps for those Valentine cards. I'm going to ask them to take a Valentine's card, and if they're married, to write to their mate a word of love and appreciation, and include it in that, on that Valentine's card, and then mail it to their mate, or slip it in their Bible or something, however they want to do that. If they're not married, there may be someone, a parent or a child or a friend that means a lot to them, that has helped them in a great way. And they want to strengthen that relationship. And I'm going to ask them to send it to that. But it's a way, again, to remind people that we are in relationship with one another, and these are extremely important. A whole book of the Bible written about that. But the most important and the greatest relationship is with our God. God bless you. Thank you for teaching this Sunday's lesson.